At the beginning of the film, we observe Margaret Lee. A woman is traveling on a train, looking through a book by the famous Vida Winter. Margaret gets off at an unremarkable station, where a driver is already waiting for her. The woman talks to the chauffeur, and he tells her about the famous Yorkshire moors. Soon, the car stops in front of a Gothic mansion. Margaret is met on the doorstep by the housekeeper. Judy says she will accompany the woman to the owner of the mansion right away. Margaret prepares with bated breath to meet Vida. The meeting takes place in the lavishly furnished library. Margaret takes a notebook and a pen with her because her goal is to interview a famous writer. Vida begins the dialogue by asking why the woman was so indifferent to her offer of an interview. Margaret explains that she is very curious as to why she has been given this honor. Vida pulls out a lengthy biography of the Bronte sisters that the woman has written, but says that she has not even read it. The writer says that Margaret's short essay on the twin sisters rather caught her attention. The woman says that in all interviews, Vida talks about her past in different ways. The writer admits that she does this in order not to bore herself. As a biographer, it is very important for Margaret to get accurate information. Vida promises that she will speak frankly, as she doesn't have long to live and would like to finally tell the truth about herself. Margaret's first question has to do with the writer's real name. Vida says that she used to be called Adelina Marsh. The writer also states a few facts from her biography and then gives her conditions. Vida wants to tell her story in chronological order without interruptions or spoilers. The writer begins with the fact that she grew up in a real haunted house. Her story is far more painful and violent than Margaret might have expected. When Vida was 17 years old, the house was destroyed by fire. The writer speaks vaguely about her fears and how her story then came to an end. Left alone, Margaret looks through newspaper clippings to find confirmation of the writer's words. Pensive, the woman twirls her jewelry in her hands and then suddenly hears music. Margaret recalls a moment from her past where she was walking through the same garden that surrounds her now. In the morning, the woman talks to the Vida's doctor and learns that the lady is seriously ill. Margaret resumes the interview. Vida is amused that the woman doesn't ask about a typical mystery, why there are only 12 in her book, 13 Tales. Soon the writer returns to her story. In the house where she grew up, her rather odd Uncle Charlie lived. One day Isabel, the mother of Adelina, and her twin sister Amelina came to this house to stay there forever. Charlie and his sister have a strange relationship. Using a razor, his brother wounds Isabel's wrists. Meanwhile, the housekeeper and gardener look after the children. Time passed. While Charlie and his sister spent nights together, the twins grew up on their own. The housekeeper and gardener replaced the girls' parents. Vida recalls that she and her sister were always inseparable. That's why they soon became violent, and once even almost killed a small child. The wife of the local doctor decided to talk to Isabel about what had happened. She found a strange devastation in the house, as if it had long ceased to be inhabited. Vida suddenly interrupts and expresses herself in a strange metaphor, saying that she was attacked by her wolf. The doctor's wife was also attacked in the house. The doctor who arrives notices marks on Isabel's hands and decides to speak to her brother alone. For a while, the doctor takes Adelina and Amelina's mother to a treatment center. After finishing another part of the story, Margaret goes up to her room and remembers her sister with dark hair. In the afternoon, the woman decides to explore the mansion where Vida grew up. Margaret tries to open the door, but then the knob turns by itself. The frightened woman runs away from the mansion. In the afternoon, Vida continues her story. After Isabel was taken away to a hospital, her brother began to go mad. One day, the doctor brought a governess into the house to look after the children. The twins didn't want to meet Esther, but that didn't stop her. Soon, the housekeeper closed the cupboards in the kitchen so that the girls couldn't take food whenever they wanted, but would come down for dinner. Esther met Amelina while her sister hid behind a pillar. The governess seemed to drive a wedge between the sisters. While the young writer rebelled, Amelina became a diligent student and an obedient girl. For this, Adelina even wounded her during a lesson. Esther noticed the strange figure of a boy gathering branches outside the window, but wrote it off to her fatigue. Margaret, in between stories, reminisces again about her sister, who was very much like her. Vida continues her story. The housekeeper tries to convince Esther that everyone in the house sees the ghost of a woman in white. The governess leaves her room and goes to the door at which Margaret saw the ghost long afterwards. Esther goes up to the attic and is startled by a noise coming from a cupboard. When the governess opens it, however, she finds nothing. Esther talks to the doctor. She is interested in the subject of the twins and the connection between their emotions and experiences. The governess suggests that the doctor do a little research to discover new aspects to the problem. One day, Amelina is putting things away in her room and hears a noise outside. Adelina is forcibly put into a car and taken to another house. Esther and the doctor are so engrossed in their research that they don't notice how much the sisters miss each other. Adelina even refuses to eat and still doesn't speak to anyone. Amelina, on the other hand, misses her sister very much and even says "we" instead of "I." One day, the governess discovers that the door to the living room, which should be locked, is open. Esther is confused, for only she has the key to this door. The governess goes outside and notices Amelina playing with her sister. Esther runs to the house where Adelina is and is shocked to learn that the girl has been in care all this time and couldn't just go outside. While comforting the governess, the doctor doesn't hold back and kisses her. This is noticed by his wife, who chases Esther out of the house. The doctor and the governess soon disappear. Adelina returns home, and the first thing she does is lash out at her sister. Vida says she can't say why she did that. Years went by. Soon, Charlie began to refuse food and then took his own life in the woods. The twins continued to live as if nothing had happened until one day, their housekeeper, trying to change a light bulb, fell and lost her life. Margaret goes to bed after another conversation with a writer. In her half-sleep, she sees strange images of Adelina and Amelina and hears her sister's voice asking for her forgiveness. Upon waking, Margaret hears a noise and looks out the window. The woman sees a strange white shadow in the garden and decides to follow it. Margaret sees a gray-haired woman who looks very much like Vida. The woman guesses that Amelina is in front of her. The old woman continues digging fiercely and says that there is something under the ground there. In the morning, Margaret comes out of her room. Hearing a noise, the woman hides in a niche and sees Vida walking into the usually closed room. The writer tends to her sister Amelina and helps her to drink water. Margaret doesn't talk about what she saw. Shortly after the tragedy that happened to the governess, a young boy starts working in the garden. Adelina asks the old gardener to show her how to trim the bushes. The gardener warns her that it is absolutely necessary to put the ladder on safety before working. Soon, Adelina wants to work in the garden again. Not finding the ladder, the girl goes to the bushes and freezes. The old gardener has fallen and lost his life by hitting the stairs. Vida says that someone messed up the fuse on the ladder, but asks Margaret to refrain from asking questions for the rest of their conversation. After the tragedy with the gardener, Adelina and the young assistant talk to the lawyer. The house is left to the sisters, and the boyfriend suggests that his grandmother look after them until they come of age. When the lawyer leaves, the assistant admits that he has no grandmother at all. Margaret guesses that it was the writer who messed up the fuse on the ladder. Vida loses her temper and says that the woman is beginning to break her promise. To calm down, Margaret goes out for a walk. No one is found in the abandoned house. Talking to the doctor, Margaret learns that Amelina is also very ill. In the living room, Vida asks why the woman is not telling her story. Margaret tries to change the subject, and before going to bed, she recalls how she lost her sister, who ran out into the road. The next day, the woman tells Vida about it. The twins were walking to school and Margaret was offended of her sister. So she crossed to the other side of the road and then took pity and called her sister to her. That is when Margaret lost her twin. The woman goes to the mansion and learns that bones have been found there. The story of the ghost that Esther saw suddenly becomes a clue. Running to the writer, Margaret tells her that there were 3 girls. Vida admits that there were. She was the daughter of Charlie and some woman, while Adelina and her sister's parents were Isabel and her brother. One day, the girl was found by the gardener, who decided to raise her secretly together with the housekeeper. In fact, the embodiment of evil in the house was Adelina. It was she who first attacked the doctor's wife, and then took the lives of the housekeeper and the gardener. Soon, Amelina and the young assistant began a relationship, and she became pregnant. Vida made the decision not to call a doctor and handle the birth on her own. The writer drinks the medicine and says that the wolf is out the door, and soon she will leave this world, which means it is time to tell the 13th tale. Vida reveals that after the baby was born, Adelina began to hate the baby for taking up her sister's time. Adelina once tried to take his life with a flame. Vida saved the baby, but was scarred by a hot door handle. However, she couldn't save Amelina. The writer says she always dreamt of having a twin, but her sisters wouldn't let her close. Vida quietly passes away while Margaret holds her hand. Soon, the woman leaves the mansion that helped there, learn new things, and forgive herself for losing her twin. Margaret plans to stay nearby to write a book about Vida and her amazing life. This is the end of the film. Thank you all for watching this video to the end. Give this video a like, write in the comments what you think about this film, and see you in new videos.